Welcome to the Vigil tutorial. Here we have a third-person template. I've added an extra map and a couple of extra character meshes. And because I've read the how to use wiki, I also have Vigil installed. So let's get it set up. I'm going to open the map. You can see if I hit play, I just have a third-person character but with a different mesh. So to get Vigil working, we can optionally make a Vigil component, or you can just use the C++ class. This will allow us to override functions if we need it. We also need a player controller, and we add our Vigil component to the player controller. To start with, we can add the default targeting data that has been included with Vigil. So we can compile and save that. Now I'm not going to assign the player controller just yet because I want to show how we debug it if it doesn't work. So if we come to our output log, we go dock and layout so we can open it. The other thing we do need to do first, otherwise we won't see anything at all, is we need to grant the Vigil ability. To do that we need an ability system. This can go on the player state or on the pawn. Then when we are possessed, don't use begin play. Possessed works when we get a controller and it only fires on the server, and only the server should give ability. Do not attempt to activate the ability, it will activate itself. So assign Vigil scan. Don't assign the Vigil scan ability. This is a C++ class. So if we open Vigil scan, all it does is it runs Vigil scan task. That's its whole job. The only other option is to change the net execution policy from local predicted to local only, and then Vigil will only run on the local client, and for a lot of games that's what you want. So now if we play, so we've got an error here. Vigil component not found on player controller 0, but that's the only information we get. Now if we type log Vigil verbose, and we play again, you can see we get more information. It activates the task, tries to cache the component, it found a player controller on the pawn, but it found no valid Vigil component, so the system has ended. And that's because we didn't assign a new player controller. So let's do that now. So if we play again, you can see that it found and cached the component this time. It bound to some events, but it had an invalid target source. So the system is waiting for a valid targeting source, and now it says system resume. With the last wait reason, an invalid targeting source. So that means that's been resolved and it's working. This is a normal part of Vigil's startup process. So we can assume it's working now, but if we want to know for sure, we can use that same command, log Vigil, but this time very verbose. And now you can see that it's firing these events. And sometimes it will say it's broadcasting a number of results. This time it's broadcasting 4 results. So if we want to get some drawings so we can actually see what those results are, we can use the controller changed event. And we can check if it is valid. Actually, we don't need to check that. So type find Vigil component for controller. This will check if it's valid. Now we only check that the component is valid. And now there are some events we can bind to. So type assign. The two that you will want is on targets ready and on focus changed. So on targets ready produces an exceptional amount of information. On focus changed produces only the actual what we are focusing rather than everything. but we want to see everything for debugging purposes. So if I just drag off the tag and type Vigil, I can choose Draw Debug Results. I can pass in the focus results. I also need to get a player controller. Now we can't use this because this is at a different place in time. These are asynchronous events. This won't exist anymore. So get controller. And we're just going to cast to a player controller. Now normally I wouldn't use a pure cast, and normally I would validate this get controller check, but for testing purposes this should suffice. So if I play, you can see we're focusing on this rock. Let's get that out of the way. And if I walk around, I'm focusing on literally everything that traces the visibility channel, because that's what it's set to. So if we start thinking about an actual game, what we might want to focus on is something that we can interact with. We might want to focus on an enemy so that when we enter strafing, like in Breath of the Wild, it will snap the camera to an strafing direction to our target. Or we might want to auto-target an ally with a heal ability. So Vigil has multiple focus channels, so we can have multiple focuses. We can have an interaction focus, we can have an ally focus, an enemy focus. For now, we'll just add interaction and default it to ignore. We won't handle characters with trace channels. So we can take the Vigil targeting data and we can just copy this. And we can just call it VP interaction. And we can duplicate that again, call it VP enemy. So if we open interaction, we can change our collision channel to the new channel interaction. So if we play again, apologies, we need to assign this to our player controller, or rather the Vigil component. Technically, since we made one, we should do it there, but for testing, this is fine. And let's use the interaction channel. We won't see anything because nothing's overlapping that channel. So let's take the crates and we can change the collision so that it will overlap the interaction channel. And now we can play again and we can see the crates. We don't get everything else like in retracing its visibility. You also notice we can focus stuff that's way out of the way. It's a lot farther than the interaction range we want. Now you can modify a data asset while you're playing in the editor. So if we decide the distance we're at now is about where we want to be, then we just move back a little bit from there, and we can just reduce the cone length here till it's out. Now if I walk closer, it comes back in. So maybe we want just a little bit more than that. And that looks like a good interaction distance for the needs of my project. Yours might be farther, it might make the character walk over to it when you interact. It's up to you. So let's talk about this indicator. If I grab a few more barrels, crates, and I walk closer, and let's just bump that up a bit for testing purposes. So you'll notice that now we've got these 4 indicators. So the green is our top priority. And you can see the priority here, the P0, and you can see its score. A lower priority and a lower score means that it's more important. The results are always sorted, so 0 is always the actual focus. Now there's A, which is our angle. We have a 5.2 degree difference between where we're looking and the angle to our target. And the maximum possible angle is the cone height of 35 degrees. If I bump this up, you can see that's gone up as well. Of course, if I reduce it, it will use the width instead because it's the highest value now. We also have a normalized amount where at 0 we're directly facing it, at a higher value we're facing away from it. So this percentage is being used to drive the scale of these locators. And you can use it to drive your UI as well. Now for an actual game, we probably don't need to see every option. So if I disconnect this, and we use the on Vigil focus changed event instead, we can do a switch on the focus tag, and we can add an interaction tag. We can also add our enemy and our ally here as well. So if we want to show that our, or perhaps we just want to send a on-focus lost event to this actor. Of course, for now, we're just going to do something very simple. Let's get its location. We'll say that when it loses focus, it just draws a red sphere. For 1 second. And if we want an on-focused event, we can just draw, let's say, a green sphere. So actually, if we use 60, we probably won't even be able to see it because the crates are quite large. So let's put it back to 100. And the other thing is that we might not have a last focus. So let's use some is valid checks. We also might not have a new focus. So we should check this also. It's going to get a little bit messy. So if that's not valid, we still want to process this. Yeah? So now, when we focus something, it gets a green sphere, and what we lost focus on gets a red sphere. And in much the same way, we could call other events on these actors when they become focused. And more importantly is we have access to what we currently have focused. So if we want to activate a gameplay ability on our focus target, we have that information. Now the other thing is, I'm going to add an debug key, let's just say G. So when I press G, we want to get Vigil, find Vigil component for pawn. We just pass in self. If it's valid. So we can go get focus actor, and we can also get the focus result, which will give us the hit result as well. So we want to get the interaction when we press G. We're just going to do the same thing. We're going to draw a pink sphere. But of course, only if it's valid. If it's not valid, maybe we make our character shake his head or do some other animation. Whatever you want to do for your game. So I press G, and sure enough, it draws it. So Vigil already tracks what the current focus target is. The only thing you really need to do is set up the events for when you lose and gain focus and actually make use of the system. Now let's talk about how to get the information that is being used to draw these debug results. In the same way that I get the focus actor, I can get focus result. And this information is also available with the focus changed event. So I can break this. I've got the tag, the same one here, and I've got the actual score, and I've got the hit result as well. But let's grab it from here for the interaction. We can break this. And now if we just drag off the hit result and type Vigil, there is a get angle and get distance to target. They give us a lot more than just the literal distance to the target or the angle to the target. We've got the normalized angle. So if we use a map range clamped with this, we can put in some values to get a value out that will give us nice results to drive our UI indicators with when we get closer or farther to this target. So now let's set up some enemy characters and friendly characters. If I take my character here and I add a, let's just say a team, and I can grab this team attitude that comes with the engine and expose it. So by default, the characters will be friendly. But if I take this mage character, let's make him hostile. We can add a couple of mages to our project. Let's also add a couple of other ones as well, some friendly characters. Now, one thing I want to show you first is how filtering works. So the only filter that we have by default with Vigil is a line of sight filter. So I can interact with both of these, but if my character walks out of line of sight, I lose the option for the first one. So if we make a filter to filter out based on team attitude, then we can filter for allies and enemies that way. So let's open VT enemy. Now it's set to visibility, and that's fine. We want to use the collision object types instead. So if there's anything in this array, it will not use the collision channel. We want to look for pawn. So now, if I assign this to our Vigil component, so we use enemy, you will probably have to add a tag. I've already pre-added these. So we can filter by enemy, but we haven't assigned that filter yet. So it will get every character, both friendly and enemy, and it will mark them all as enemies, as you can see. So it's just that tag there. So now we want to filter based on their team attitude. So where you see this filter line of sight, now keep in mind the order is important. First we select targets, then we filter them, then we sort them. And the order of the filters as well is also important. Now Vigil includes a helper for you. This pawn relationship. If we create a child, we can make one to filter based on the team. If I move it here. And then I can override should ignore pawn. So there's nothing in the parent function here. But let me just point out that this class has some good information for you for how to get these results to build your own custom target filters. Now the source pawn, that's us. We don't need to query our own pawn for anything for this. Your own project might have some more complex interactions that you have functions for, so it does include it. So we can just, it's valid, which it should always be if this triggered at all. Cast to BP third person character. In. So I'm just going to quickly promote this, and I'm just going to delete that set code because we're not actually setting it from there. So now we've got the same property. So we're filtering based on team. So we just want to see, is it in the same team that we've set our filter to? If so, we want to return true. If we return true, then it's going to remove this as one of the results. So what this means is now we can, let's filter by team before we filter by line of sight. Let's just assume it's a cheaper filter to run. So we can add that filter. We want to find enemies, so we're going to filter out friendly. And we're also going to insert another one. We're going to filter out neutral. So we only end up with hostile targets. So let's play again. And sure enough, we only get the enemies. Now if you want to also get the allies, that's the exact same process, but I won't do it again because I'd be doing nothing different. You can grab the enemy from here, or the ally, and you can do the same here as well. So this way Vigil will allow you to track any amount of focus targets that you need for your project. We're almost done. There is more that we could go over, but I will let you experiment with these and rely on the wiki. But let's talk about debugging. So we've talked about the logging, and we can silence that by just changing it back to log instead of verbose, or very verbose in this case. And we don't need it now, it's working fine, we've got our information drawing anyway. Now if you type p.vigil There are three options here. You take Selection Debug. You're going to see something that looks a bit glitchy, but if I press the semicolon to eject to the debug camera, you can see that it is drawing a cone and a box. So the way the target selection works for the cone is it draws a box that is the size of the maximum size that the cone can possibly be. So it encompasses the entire cone. So if the box is red, it found something within the box. If it found something within the box, then it's going to actually do an angle check to see if it's within the cone. We can disable that by running the same command. There's also Scan Debug, which just tells us how many targeting requests we have in the top left corner. And there's also the Filter Debug, so we can see that trace that it's doing for filtering line of sight. So for getting set up with Vigil and learning how to use it, that covers everything. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the plugin.